Data is like a bikini. What it reveals is interesting, what it hides is crucial. Right? I used to always say that. And that's the truth. I worked with obviously the Indian national team at the 2003 World Cup. I've been with the Indian football team now for the last, let's say, 15, 16 months. That team's done well. Then I was with Kings 11 Punjab in the IPL for 2 seasons. If they are not in the top 1% of athletes in their field physically, then you've not done the work. I can't help you.
For high performance, how do you transform those struggles, those pains into empowerment?
All of your emotions of fear, anxiety, excitement, anger are all when the mind is there, but the mind is behind you. That's the first number one rule of elite high performance. Once you start to interpret, the human brain operates on 4 things.
For high performance, how do you transform those struggles, those pains into power, into empowerment?
Yeah, because I learned this in the temple that there is no good emotion and bad emotion. Anger is not a bad emotion, because if you channel anger positively, it's a great emotion. Like I lived in the temple, and one of the scriptures that we talk about is the Ramayana, where Lord Ram and Hanuman was there, and and Hanuman, there was a moment when he had to carry an entire mountain, right? And he was able to carry it because he rechanneled anger. He was able to achieve so much because he served with love, but he had a lot of anger, and that anger was channeled into power. And I have a million athletes who step onto a field with a point to prove. They're angry that they lost that game. They're angry that a person thinks they're not good enough. They're angry that the world doesn't believe in them. And they rechannel that anger into a new narrow type of focus that allows them to achieve it. So the first part of high performance is there is nothing bad. We recognize what is present and we rechannel it. Anxiety is not a bad emotion. Anxiety reframed can be very, very positive, And when you look at good or bad, psychology has told us that really positive emotions like love, joy, and happiness are equally detrimental in a performance environment as anger as well. Because why? They are equally distracting. Happiness can distract you as much as anger can.
Tell me more. Then how do you use the emotions then?
You use the emotion to stay focused on the task. But if you allow the emotion to pull you in a different direction, it's distraction. So if you are happy about an environment, that's where you find most. If you look at Olympic swimmers or Olympic track and field athletes, when they walk on with earphones. Because they completely block out all of the sound. They don't want to hear too much of distraction. Sound is a distraction. Emotions a distraction. They completely carve it out so you can stay focused. So it's not about recognizing one is positive and one is bad. It's about recognizing what is present and how do I reframe and reuse that to keep my mind focused on the task at hand. That is it. Everything must distill down to the task at hand.
Wow, that is so powerful. Maybe you can give us an example of an athlete that you work that did that really well, like how he went from managing really well the emotions to stay present and perform at the best.
I've had tons of athletes. One really, really exceptional athlete is the tennis player Sania Mirza. Sania got to 27 in the world. She got to number 1 in doubles, won multiple Grand Slams. But Sania, we worked together in India from I think 2007-8 till about 2012 when I stopped traveling on the tour, and she was India's number 1 female athlete. She came from a Muslim background, and it was in a time in India when female athletes were not rife and you weren't seeing them too many. And tennis as a sport requires you to wear really, really short clothing, and you have to travel and all of that, which was not accepted too well religiously. And she was dealing with a lot in the media, and she was dealing with a lot religiously. But I kept on seeing that no matter what happened and what was thrown at her, right, she channeled everything that the world threw into her performance, saying, the only way I'm going to rise above this is if I win. The only way I'm going to rise above this is her. And she had a beautiful ecosystem around her. Her mom, her dad, the players she was traveling with, the coaches, the support staff, everyone kept her really focused. But she was the driving force. She was the one who kept the distraction aside, showed up at every single match realizing, if I win, the noise settles. If I lose, the noise gets better, right? And I can only imagine how much it disturbed her and how much it, every time you open a newspaper, every time you open social media, someone's saying something, you don't know where they are, you've never met them, but everyone feels the right and the privilege to say whatever they want to about you. That's an athlete's life. She completely rechanneled that every single time to, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to move forward with that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so, so good. So in terms of a performance, maybe when an athlete comes to you to work with you, tell us, can you break down what's the process that they go through with you in order to achieve whatever they want to achieve?
Yeah, so the first thing when someone comes to me is, generally, because I am not traveling full-time with athletes all the time, I'm not a part of their full-time staff in terms of physios, strength and conditioning. I'm a strategist. I look at the data and I look at the mind and I look at a very, very technical problem. So the first thing I'm trying to break down with them is I ask them, okay, so what is it? What's the problem? If they're saying, hey, listen, I am top 10 and I need to get to number 1. I said, great. And then, I need to knock off 0.2 of a second to qualify for the Olympics in whatever event. I said, great. Then the next thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish a checklist of everything they've tried, every single thing that they've tried. Okay, so I said, you know what you need to do because it's clear as daylight, and those metrics are external. The whole world's measuring everyone by those metrics. So tell me every single thing that you have tried before you've even come here. Right. So that's an interesting conversation because I want to see how their mind thinks. Now, the areas of performance are, it's physical competency.
Yeah.
The second is technical. So how good is your technique? The third is your strategy and awareness. And the fourth is your mental. So most people, right, if they are not in the top 1% of athletes in their field physically, I can't help them. Then you've not done the work. You go back. Yeah. I can't help you. Right. Let's assume you are there. Right. And you've got a really sound technique because you've had multiple wins. You are succeeding at that highest level. Then we can say, okay, we've ticked that box. Now, let's go into strategy. Let's go into understanding, okay, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And how are we using this in your game plan? Are we actually using your strengths? So strengths can be mental, strengths can be physical, strengths can be technical, strengths can be tactical. Are you thinking of everything through the lens of strengths? Now this becomes very different when you're working with team versus individual sports, because in a team sport, you can have a weakness and that weakness can be circumnavigated through other people's strengths. In individual sport, you can't have any weaknesses because it gets exploited from the first minute. So we look at it very differently. But once I start to create a checklist of what they've tried, I start to understand where they're prioritizing, where they're spending a lot of time. Most people put time in the technique, put time in the physical, put time in the nutrition, spend very little on the mental, spend very little on the strategy. Then I go in a little deeper to start to look at the ecosystem. I look at the relationship between them and the rest of their support staff, the relationship between them and their coaches, right? What is the success there? What is the ecosystem of people supporting them? How much of that is feeding that energy and constantly getting them to raise the bar? In ecosystem, I say, like a rising tide lifts all ships. So that's your ecosystem. Everyone in that ecosystem has to be rising and contributing to making sure everyone's better. So we kind of go into that. And once we start to do that, now we're starting to peel away the layers of, we bring in the data. We look at, okay, I've now got what is a subjective analysis of where we need to go and what needs to be done through your lens. Sometimes I'm doing interviews with coaches or parents to validate that subjective lens. Now I bring in the data to look at it objectively and I layer both together. Is the data a realistic match with what you're interpreting? Or is the actual problem in your interpretation of your own game and your own strengths? Because that's the first gap to bridge. If the data is not supporting what you think, I can't do anything. We have to get these two because the data doesn't lie. It may not reveal everything, but it's not lying about what it does reveal. So once we start to bring that in, then we're creating a mind map. And then we realize we break everything up. And this is where we get a fork in the road, where we have to distinguish between what is a strategic problem versus what is an execution problem. So for example, if I know that as a tennis player, the person is weak on the wide serve, right, and a wide first serve. So the question is, we understand that if we exploit that area, we can get a significant advantage. That's a strategic thing that we've come up with. The second is the ability to execute it. So is the problem in identifying the opportunity on how to get the win, or is the problem actually in how you execute what we've identified? These are two completely different problems. Once you diagnose them, then we know exactly where to go and where to work. The strategy is very easy because we can do video analysis, we can speak to other coaches. There's enough data to create that. 90% of the time, it's in execution. It's in the ability to repeatedly execute a skill with the highest level of proficiency to maximize your strength and get out that weakness. Once we've identified that, we now look at the constraints we have in play. So for example, an athlete can only physically practice for so many hours in a day. He has only so much of time or so much of access to resources. You cannot double that because it comes with ramifications, with recovery. He's got travel constraints. He may have financial. We look at all the constraints, and within that, how can we now retweak things to improve the execution score on a particular skill so that we can get something going, And this is what we do with professional athletes. Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah. So you mentioned a lot about data. What is the data point which is more difficult to get, but very, very, very important for the execution or for the success of the athlete?
In 2003, I was working with a psychologist. His name is Dr. Sandy Gordon. He was working with India.
Yeah.
We brought him on as a mental coach. And he used to say something interesting about data, which is so true. He says, data is like a bikini. What it reveals is interesting. What it hides is crucial. Right? He used to always say that. And that's the truth. When we live in a world where we're inundated by data, and everyone spends a lot of time trying to talk and look at every single data point. In the world of sport, we have a few simple rules that we look at. The first thing is we don't answer questions. Our job is to question the answers. That's the first number one rule of elite high performance. Someone gives you an answer. You don't just accept it. You question that answer. And is that the best possible answer? The reason we do that is because when you answer a question, an answer is a statement. A statement ends with a full stop. A full stop is the end of the story. But when you question the answer, you ask a question. A question is a rabbit hole to deeper, more intricate findings. So the first thing we teach the entire ecosystem is to think in questions and ask questions, more importantly than anything else. So when you get a data set in front of you, you don't make statements, you ask questions, because questions start to reveal a lot more than answers could possibly do. Now, the second thing with data is before you even look at a data set, as a coach, as a high performance person, or even as an athlete, you must know what you want to measure. Because if you don't know what you want to measure, if you don't know what is going to help you understand and get better, then you start looking at the wrong thing. Because everything looks interesting and everything looks exciting. In a football game, we could collect anywhere from 80,000 to about 500,000 data points in 90 minutes on the plays. It's impossible to analyze every single thing. Everyone will give you the standard things. Oh, this is the total distance covered. This is the number of turns. This is everything. And actually, when I'm looking at a data set, there's certain amounts of data that determine the health of the athlete before the game, and there's certain amounts of data that determine how dangerous an athlete is. For example, the one data point that determines how dangerous a person is the top speed of his run. So his cardiovascular ability, his total distance that he runs is irrelevant compared to his top speed. Because why? Top speed is indicating to me, if I'm putting a guy who's running at a top speed of 34 kilometers an hour, and he's running on the same wing as a person whose top speed is 32 kilometers an hour, I'm going to win every single time because I know over 10 meters he's going to get an advantage. You understand? So I'm not interested in anything else. I'm only looking at that. So with data, you have to know what you're looking for first before you even look at the data set, because the data set will be very, very distracting. Okay, and most people cannot even determine, don't even understand, whether they're looking at data because it's present or whether they're looking at data because it is important. Right? Very, very, very. And once you start to know what you want to measure, you can create your own assessments that allow you to measure that. So, for example, we've been speaking about high performance and elite athletes. Let me give you an example of, let's assume a 15, 16, 18-year-old comes to me, who's not even turned professional, but is competitive enough, performing, very serious, may have a lot of money, all of that. So now the data is irrelevant, because the data for that kid is not an indication of how he's going to perform at an elite level in 5 years' time. His body is still going through physiological changes, emotional changes, mental changes. The maturity index is still going to change. So I can't rely on that. I cannot make a very, very constructive decision based on that data. Also, because he's playing in an amateur league, we have no control, I have no data set against who he's playing. So we don't know the quality of the opponent as well. So if you don't know the quality of the opponent, why would you put importance on the quality of the data it's got? Okay. So, but we need to make a decision. So what I generally do is I will have a call with the athlete and I'll say, okay, listen, today is Monday, right? Give me a list of everything you'll be doing in the next 2 weeks. Every single thing. I want to know how many gym sessions, I want to know how many technical sessions, if you have to go to school, how many classes you need to attend. I want to know what time you wake up, what time you go to sleep, if you do meditation, how you do it. I want to know how many meals you're going to eat, how many protein shakes you're going to drink. Give me an absolutely exhaustive list of everything you wish to achieve in the next 2 weeks. Okay, and done. He sends it to me, and then bang, I don't speak to him, I don't phone him, I don't do anything for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, I send him that list again, and I say, okay, listen, tick everything that you've done. Right? I'm not looking for reasons or whatever, just everything. I had these many shakes, I attended this many, I practiced for this hard, I did this. Now, when I have a wish list, I have a data point of so many things. And when I have what he executed, I have a data point of so many things. And I'm looking at what is the ratio of it, right? What is the ratio of how much he says he's going to do versus how much he actually does?
Oh.
Right. Then,
yeah.
Now that is an indication. Now, I'm not even gone into the granular details of that one number. If that number is not north of 85%, I don't even touch this person. Because if he can't listen to himself, why is he going to listen to me?
Oh.
Because I didn't tell him what to do. I asked him, what do you want to do? If he can't do what he wants to do, what chance does he have of doing what I want? In the long run, zero, right? And 85% is a very, very high threshold of what is actually needed. It's a discipline index for me, that this person is highly disciplined. When they put something down on paper, they will go the extra mile to do it. Then now I take that number and I go slightly detailed and I say, okay, these are everything you did. Now on a grading scale of 1 to 3, I want you to grade everything. 1, very easy. Mixing a protein shake, great, do it. 3 is I need to go for a very hard anaerobic session, sprint session, very hard practice session, things, whatever you think was really hard, categorize them. Then I take that 85% and I break it down across the spectrum of these 3 numbers. And I'm saying, is this person doing a lot of shit that's very easy, but scared of the things that are very, very hard? And that's giving me an indication of how their mind works, right? Now, this number here is letting me know, okay, this is the type of personality I get. It could be, and none of it is emotion-based. It's completely coming from the subconscious mind. Once I start to break this in, now I've got an entire mind map along with a strategy execution map. And I'm starting to look at data in a completely different way. I'm starting to look at what actually matters. Then I superimpose that data point on the actual data from games where we can see, okay, now we got a chance of moving this.
Oh, so what you're saying, so you look at, one is about the discipline, right? Whatever you say you're going to do, you have to do it,
Yes.
right? You measure that. Second is about your ability to take the right decisions, to choose what is important, right?
Correct.
Like, what else are criteria that you see in high performers? These are two that you mentioned. What else?
In high performance, so decisive decision making is very, very critical, right? So that's what you actually want to teach an athlete, because an athlete in a high performance environment has no time.
Yeah.
So he has to be very decisive in his decision making. So and this will have ramifications throughout the entire ecosystem. In the spiritual world, you'll call it intuition. In the sports world, you call it gut feeling. All of these come from there. So I have found ways in which I try to quantify these things. So for example, I created a completely different index with it, where I ask my athletes, an intuition is a feeling, it's a voice that comes in, or a gut feeling, I think I should do this. So if you take a classic case, for example, a fast bowler is at the top of his run-up and he's about to bowl. He may have an, okay, listen, I should do this. He's bowled to the guy, he says, I should bowl back of a length, I should bowl a bouncer, I should bowl a yorker, whatever it is. That forecast. When that decision comes in, okay, you have two choices. You either listen or you don't listen, right? So if you listen to it, great. Now we have two more options. It worked or it didn't work. If you didn't listen to it, it's the end of the story. So very, very first thing is we start every time the athlete can remember a voice coming in about a specific choice he has, we start to quantify. Okay, choice A, did I listen, didn't I listen? Then that's my first data point. My first data point is, what percentage of the time does he actually listen to that inner gut feeling? If he's 70% of the time he changes it, then 70% of the time he's not even acknowledging that gut feeling. Wow. Let's assume 70% of the time he did listen to it. Okay, great. We have more data to work with. Now comes the result. It worked or it didn't work. So then we're starting to understand the strength of the intuition, because we're starting to say, okay, if 80% of the time you were right or the result was favorable, then the intuition's strong. Then we can start to shift the 70 higher. We can start to connect them to that gut feeling and to that body a lot. But in between all of this here is a critical thing, which you spoke about just now, which is physical prowess and execution, which is, I may say to myself, I should bowl a yorker. The question is, and you may say, yes, I'll do that. The question is, does it land where it needs to? All right, which is a very, very important data point about your ability to execute what your mind wants you to do. We're bringing together the relationship between the body and mind and how synchronized they are with respect to that. Am I missing it by 2 meters or am I missing it by 2 inches? It lets us know. So once we're starting to get this data point, we're starting to see, okay, listen, where, how, what do we need to do to start to strengthen it? Because coaching is not about me giving him the best advice. Coaching is about teaching him how to recognize what is the best option in that situation. Because he's always going to be alone, So this is the process of how we go. And a lot of it, we get judged by the results of the team and we get judged by the results of it. But it has very little to do with those results because our process is not based on the strength of a person. We're trying to unlock something completely different in him, and the results may translate there or they may not in this season, but it's a completely different game plan that we are operating on.
That's interesting, and I want to explore that. So how can we, for example, each person use the intuition in order to increase our performance? Whatever we are doing in life or in business, how can we use intuition for performance?
Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to recognize it, right? And the second thing is you need to trust it and you need to execute on it.
Exactly.
So let's give an example. Let's assume you got a best friend. And the best friend comes to you for advice. Okay, and you give him advice. The first time you're going to sit like this, it may be like a podcast, you speak to him for 1.5 hours, you tell him everything, all of the knowledge you have, you download it, you give it to him. This guy goes and does absolutely zero. He comes back 2 weeks later, he says, I want to talk, he comes. You get a little frustrated because he's done nothing, but you talk for 30 minutes. By the 5th time that he comes, you're not even picking up the phone because you realize, I'm wasting my time. He's not going to do anything. But yet, if he came back and said, hey, I tried XYZ, this what worked, this didn't work. You'd say, okay, great, now I'm interested, let's deconstruct. Your energy changes. It's the same relationship with that inner voice. If you're not going to listen to it, right, it's going to get dull and dull and dull and dull. And the more you listen to it, the more amplified that voice gets, the more crystal clear the voice gets, the more clear the message gets. Now remember, the thing with intuition is there's also a word. See, your brain has a frame of language and you have a gut feeling. But that feeling is translated through the language framework you have into a message into your brain. So it could get broken in many ways. You could have used the wrong words to interpret a feeling which sent the wrong message to the brain. But the more you start to listen and the more you start to practice, you start to deconstruct your own language framework in relationship to the feelings you get, right? That's how it gets stronger. That's how it gets better. It gets better by peeling away the layers of your own interpretation of your feelings in relation to what it is and how to execute it, and the language you use to describe it. Because the language is critical. For me, language is everything. You know, when I was asking my football team, you know, I was telling them, guys, we're going to play a big game. We're playing a very big game. You know, give me a few words to describe, you know, how you want to show up on this field, right? And the guy said, I want to be committed. I want to be hardworking. I want to be hungry. I want to be determined. I said, great. None of these words are wrong. You ask any elite coach or any team leader, if my employees are this, will you be happy? They'll all say yes. I said, now, if we come across a team, if the team that we are playing, it says that we're going to be alert, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to be upbeat, we're going to be loud, who do you think is going to win this game? Who do you think is going to win this game? They're going to win it. And the only thing that's different is the words they're using to describe how they're going to show up. And they will win 9 out of 10 times, right? So language is every single thing. And a lot of times, you know, we live in a world where we're inundated by content, by media, by everything. And the same words are thrown out over and over and over again. High performance is become, you know, the most general term ever. You know, commitment, determination, discipline, very dear. And as a result, when you frequently hear the same language, it doesn't mean the same thing. So one of the things of high performance is to disregard common language and recreate your own language to reinstill and rise up your energy. Because if you use old language that has a different connotation in a setting where you need to show up with high energy, it's never going to work. It's always it's going to lower the energy as opposed to raise it. So a large part of performance psychology is about reframing the language we're using. And that language set needs to become sacrosanct in the locker room where everyone is using the same language. This is critical. So this is how we start to interpret the relationship between that feeling, the language, and starting to break it down.
Wow, it's fascinating. I never thought from that lens. Maybe for now people to understand, if we bring it, like, can you now explain the same that you do with the athletes? Now, what is the work that you do in terms of high performance with, let's say, with a leader? Or with a leader? Can you break down that?
Oh, absolutely. So it's no different to a leadership team. So the first thing we're doing is we have to start with a problem statement. So what is the leader's problem with his team? You know, is it that I'm missing the KPIs, or you know, or the team's communication or energy is great, or they miss deadlines? What is the problem that you have, right? Or maybe the problem may not be in the team, but the problem may be a problem statement in the company as such. You know, and by the way they describe that problem statement, I start to understand how much clarity they have about the problem themselves, you know, and stuff. And once you see that, then you go to the same checklist. Okay, you've had this problem. What have you done? What are the X, Y, Z? So, for example, I was coaching a client who was starting a new business in the shrimp industry, and he was going up against a very, very big competitor. And 3 times in a row, he hired the business development person from the big company, and 3 times they did nothing. So I said, what has that taught you? He says, it's taught me that, you know, they're not that good. I said, no, the mistake is that you expected them to come with the network of that company, but not. They come as an individual. And the network and the relationship that a brand has with that company is very sacrosanct and independent of the person who's servicing that. That's a very, very critical learning. So which means that now, right, it's not about communication. It's not about just contacting them. It's about the offering that we have to put on the table. So now we don't have an execution problem because you got the person who's got their number. The problem is they're answering the phone, they're just not signing the paper. So the offer is very different. So we look at strategy versus execution. Then comes the thing with teams where every one of us has certain psychological and psychometric strengths and weaknesses. So for example, an artist is a very gestalt thinker. His big picture. He likes to see the big picture, he'll draw it. A CEO is gestalt, very big picture. Some people are executioners. They come down into the granular details. It's the classic Steve Wozniak, classic Steve Jobs kind of problem. One was granular, one was gestalt, right? And they come together. Now, when you look at the problem statement, am I putting the right people in the team to do that? So for example, if you are hiring executioners to come up with a new strategy, you will fail. And if you are hiring strategic people to execute a problem, you will fail. And the one thing I teach people about teams is the biggest problem is that we make teams sacrosanct. We put them in a team and we keep them in this box and you are in this team. Yeah. But teams are a living, breathing entity in every single company. They're living, breathing, having a life of their own. They're evolving, and they must evolve as the organization grows. So when you have a strategic problem, you have to have a strategic team. And when that team has found out what we want to try, that team has to now evolve into a group of executioners who know how to look at problems through an execution lens. Right? The team doesn't break up and doesn't form a new one. It evolves. So when you start to look at teams as a living, breathing organism within a macro system, you approach it very differently to something that's just sacrosanct and in a box to sort those problems out. One of the other big challenges in teams is leaders seem to think that we need to give the answer. They think that as soon as I become a leader, my job is to have every answer. I mean, yesterday you were a normal employee. Today you got promoted. And the only thing you did between these 2 days was fall asleep, right? Yesterday you asked questions. Why is it that today you give statements? You understand? Everything is a journey. So a leader's job is not to give statements. A leader's job is to ask the right questions. And the job is to teach other people how to find the right answers. And that's how you do it, by getting questions. And once we start to evaluate things through different lenses, you will everything in the system gets better. There's a beautiful book called Anti-Fragile, Nicholas Nassim Taleb. And he says, he talks of systems will always get better. And we are the sacrificial lambs in any system. People are sacrificial lambs. A system will always get better. Always. Every company will always become more efficient, more processes. And the people in it will change. The learnings we get from them will change. We've seen this. We've seen how different diversity, equity, inclusion rules have come in. They've made systems stronger. We've got new psychometric assessments. We've seen the innovation of generative AI and all of this coming in, machine learning, right? What has that done? It's made very few people as good as how much the systems improved. The individual growth is minuscule compared to the growth of the system. The system always gets better, right? And we are the people who make it better. We are the sacrificial lambs in it, that it happens. So you must understand that systems will always enhance. And if you're not enhancing it, you will be replaced. So,
And what I think a point that really hit home for me was about not just in high performance athletes, but also in companies ourselves. Is don't be so focused on getting the answers. Also, you mentioned a lot about mindset. right?
Yeah.
Like how can we build a winning mindset?
So so the question is, what is a winning mindset? So you're asking me, how do we build a winning mindset? I'm asking you, how would you define what a winning mindset is? How would you define it?
A winning mindset is when you are able to think positive and break through situations.
Okay, a winning mindset is to break through situations. Great. Okay, that's one of the factors we got. If we had to keep adding things to what a winning mindset is, how else would we describe it?
It's about the ability to stay motivated.
Okay, great. Stay motivated.
And persevere.
Yeah, persevere, all that. So now what we're starting to do is we're starting to deconstruct what are the variables of winning mindset. You've just broken it to me, right, yourself. I've not done anything. So now when you ask the question of how do I cultivate a winning mindset, you've already gone to a granular level of what it is that I need to cultivate. You've got that there. Right? Now, what we do in teams, right, very, very clearly and very honestly, is we start to evaluate everything through the lens of process. A winning mindset, that word winning is a very, very, it can be very distracting and it can be the wrong word. I don't like it. When we say winning mindset, I don't like that word winning. Win is a term we use to a result. But actually, a winning or a champion's mindset is not a result-oriented mindset. It's a process-oriented mindset. So the framework, the language, we're going back to what I said when we were talking about gut feelings, language matters. So when you tell your team, I want to cultivate a winning mindset, and then you break down all these variables, you've already steered the ship in the wrong direction, because you use language that directs the mind to the result as opposed to using language that directs the mind to the process. That's the first problem. We got. So when you rewrite the language, okay, then we can use it. Like, I don't use winning mindset, we say champion's mindset. Right. Now, when you deconstruct champions, what is the elements of champions? The elements of champions is, the first thing is, what makes you a champion is longevity, legacy. A champion is not a one-time person who's produced a result positively once. He's produced positive results for a decade, or if not two. So the first thing about a champion mindset is longevity, is legacy. Now if I deconstruct legacy and longevity, what are the things that will make a person survive or thrive for a long period of time? Then it's the adaptability to change. It's the ability to evolve. So now we're getting more granular aspects of what the thing does. All right. How does a champion constantly evolve? Or more importantly, what is evolving? Is it the mind that's evolving, or is it something else that's evolving? Then you come down to the process, and then the process is evolving. So you deconstructed that a champion's mindset is the sticking to a process, but the constantly evaluating and evolving a process over a period of a decade or two. Right. So then now the result doesn't matter. It's about the process. So when we cultivate a champion's mindset, we're not looking at wins or losses. We're looking at what have we learned from both to evolve the process. And this is very important because in the world of a champion, there is no difference between a win and a loss. There's a win and a loss for the spectator. For a champion, he's learned as much from the loss as he's learned from the win. So how can you put them on two different pedestals? If both things have taught you the same, why should they be respected differently? Right? We respect them exactly the same because they both are contributing to the single most important thing, which is process. So how do you cultivate a champion's mindset? It's very simple. The first question you got to ask yourself is, what is my process? Write it down as detailed as possible. If you cannot write a process, and if you do not have a process, you're a sitting duck. So that is your starting point, because if we don't have a process, we don't know what to evaluate and how do we improve. Then we can start to look at, okay, what is working and what is not working on the basis of different things we've done, games, situations, projects, what's worked here, what's not worked, everything. We go. And in corporate, it could be, for example, when I get a project in, I've learned, okay, I've executed 3 similar projects for a similar client. Okay, we've always missed the deadline because we need 4 or 5 feedback loops for them to get enough thing. Great, bring it in. So you bring it into your process where you realize, in my process, the timeline needs to be longer. In my process, I have to build into this process 5 feedback calls. Otherwise, I'm not going to deliver the result. The loss, which is 5 times you've not, or 3 times you've not delivered on the result, is taught you something. Bring it into process. The 10th time you repeat this and you keep adding steps to it, you will get it right. And once you get it right, you just repeat. And then as something starts to change in the world, you go back. So if you have a process and we all of a sudden wake up in a world where we're in a pandemic and we can't go to work and the world is shut down, you take an external situation, you superimpose it on a process and you say, okay, what aspects of my process has this situation impacted? Okay. So what steps in the process do I need to change?
Yeah.
You understand? So you take a variable process. That's how champions think.
Wow. So, 2 takeaways from what you said. One is like, you need to be very mindful about the language that you use, right? And always you have this balance between a strategy or whatever you want to achieve versus the execution.
Correct.
To be honest, for me, it's been a journey and in order how to balance the two, how to have goals, but at the same time, to stay focused on the goals, but at the same time, be completely present in the moment, in the process.
Correct.
Can you give us some tips on how to have a good balance between having goals and focus on the process?
Yeah, 100%. You're talking. We spoke just now about Gestalt and granular, and the goal is something that's in the distant, in the future.
Exactly.
Right. And the process is something that's very, very now. Now, you can't, when you set the first question you got to do is, do I have clarity around my goals? How crystal clear is my goal? Like, am I able to describe it? Am I able to embody the feelings? Am I able to understand exactly what it's needed? Then from that goal, you break down what are the executionable steps that are going to help you reach that. So for example, nobody knows which day they get fit. They just get fit because you realize that if you want to lose weight or you want to get fitter, I need to go to a gym and I need to cover X amount of distance, right? Now, you're not looking at every step you take. You're not measuring how much closer to my fitness goal it's getting me. But when you look your head up again, you've realized I covered this amount of distance, but you stay focused on the process. So how clear the execution steps are will determine what? If you're moving in the right direction, right? So direction is one, destination is the other. Goal is destination, execution is direction, right? And every now and then, so the first step you do is you distill down all your steps that you want to execute. And then, Rodrigo, you do it for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then you lift your head up, you say, okay, am I moving in the right direction? Is it getting me to where I want to? But you'll only know if you're getting there if you've described that very, very clearly. That's the only way you'll do that. Okay?
Yeah.
And remember, now what happens? Now, how would you know where you're looking is the question.
Exactly.
The question
That's
is
exactly
not,
what I was thinking. Yeah.
The question is not about goals versus process versus that. The question is, how do I know where my mind is looking? Right? Is my mind, like, I'm telling you this and you could be nodding your head and saying, yes, I completely get it logically, right? But how would you be able to recognize that my mind is not here, but it's actually there? Is the most important question, right? And the way you'll do it is very simple. When the mind is here, there are no emotions. When the mind is there, there's emotions. All of your emotions of fear, anxiety, excitement, anger are all when the mind is there or the mind is behind you.
Okay.
Right? The mind can be behind you as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when the mind is here, there is no emotion. There's only execution. Right. So a neutral mind, right, is a mind that's present. Once you recognize any emotion, any feeling coming in, the mind has shifted. It's either gone back or it's gone forward. You know that. And once you start to interpret, the human brain operates on 4 things. It operates on symmetry. First thing is symmetry, right? It loves symmetry. If something is asymmetrical, then it's a sign of danger. You know, like for example, you wake up, you're feeling perfectly normal. You stand in front of a mirror, you say, hey, there's a little swelling here. It's a sign, okay, something's wrong. Maybe I'm a dentist. Then the pain and all comes. First, the asymmetry comes in. The second thing is the human brain likes shortcuts. Okay, so you'll notice that after a while, you don't read everything. You're skipping lines, you're doing that, you catch packing chunks because the brain likes to work fast. You know, it was Daniel Goleman who wrote this and spoke about the fast brain and the slow brain. Okay, the third thing that it likes is it likes stories. The only way to connect unrelated pieces of information is through storytelling narratives. Okay, and the fourth thing that the brain likes is the brain likes familiarity. What is familiar, it will constantly deviate to. It loves what is familiar. If you go to buy a suit, there's a very good chance you will look at gray as a color of your choice. And someone will say, hey, listen, you've got 3 gray suits. Why don't you try another color? You may listen to them. If you went alone, there's a good chance you'll buy another shade of gray. You know, because that's just how the brain likes. The brain draws comfort from what is familiar. Now, using that familiarity lens, let's bring it back to where the mind goes. The mind will go to a place it is familiar with because it likes familiarity. So each one of us have a familiar place where the mind goes. We know that the brain and the mind executes perfectly in the present, but it doesn't always stay here. So if it doesn't stay here, where's it going? It can only go to 1 or 2 places. It can go forward or it can go back. Forward is future, back is past. And if it's in the forward, it can only be thinking of 1 or 2 things, something positive or something negative in both places.
Yeah.
So now you interpret that. So when the brain is forward, positive, you will have a voice of premeditation. You'll be thinking of how I'm going to be doing something or how I'm going to be celebrating before you've even won or before the moment has even come. It's premeditation.
Yeah.
If the brain is forward, thinking of something negative, there's fear. Fear and uncertainty is future. Okay. If the brain is in the past, positive, there's a feeling of confidence. I got this, I got this, I got this. You've not done any of the preparation, but you still have that amazing feeling of I've got this under control. Right? And if the brain is in the past, thinking of something negative, there's a paralysis of action, there's procrastination. You know, there. So when you start to recognize where the brain goes, we know what we need to do to pull it back to the middle because the toolkit for all these 4 places is completely different. But the brain likes familiarity, right? So it'll go to the same place every single time. And the classic examples are, you'll see a person who's overconfident, for example. He's overconfident in any situation you pull him to. Because why? His brain has gone to a past positive, which is completely unrelated. It's drawn on that confidence and he's superimposed it there. Okay, so that's the thing. A person who is fearful, and this is where it becomes so difficult, is that if your brain navigates to past or future failure, you're going to have this fear in there. And irrespective of the number of successes you've had, you could have had 100 consistent successes. Your mind will still jump there and highlight a failure. You understand? Which is why it's so important to recognize where the mind goes to know where to bring it back. Because bringing it back is the only way to keep it focused on the process, which will help you achieve your goal.
Shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good. So good. So good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, well, if we bring, so that's where people struggle, right? Because people get a lot distracted. Either they are on the future, either they are on the past. Then there's the feelings as anxiety or fear. Yeah. So can you help us with how can we maintain a focus on the present? What are some tools, techniques, or your advice for this to happen? Because this is, I think, is the key of performance, right?
Yeah, the key of performance. So the first thing is you have to train the brain. The brain is neuroplastic.
Yeah.
You know, so the more you train it, the more it responds to that.
Yeah.
So for example, if everyone's listening, we can try a little thing. I'll show you how neuroplastic the brain is. So I want you to, take a short breath in, go 2 seconds in, and then exhale. But when you exhale, just snap your fingers. So do a long exhalation and snap your fingers. Go in and go. Go in. In. Long and slow exhale. In. Go again. One more time. In. So now try to snap your finger when you're breathing in. Go. And it stops it. So as soon as you snap your finger, one or two things happens. It will shorten the inhalation and it'll turn it into an exhalation. Because neurologically, what we've just done is we've connected a snap of the finger to an exhalation. And your brain has remembered that, So anyone who's doing this would either, as soon as you snap your finger, start to exhale. And if you try to do it while you're inhaling, it'll stop that breath immediately. Now, if we can take 30 seconds to rewire the brain, it shows you how neuroplastic the brain is, right? So the brain needs to be trained. So the first thing we have to recognize is that there's so much of distraction that's rewiring our brain against process on a day-to-day basis. Your job is asking you about deadlines, making you see KPIs, making you see everything except process. You have to constantly bring the brain back to it. The second thing I said is the brain likes familiarity. So the fastest way to stay in process is to build a routine around that process. So for example, why most people struggled in COVID is because everyone had a process with how they went to work and started work. I woke up, I had a cup of coffee, I kissed my kids goodbye, I jumped in the train was 1 hour, I got off at this station, I walked here. You repeated that every single day for years, your brain registered that. So when you got off at Andheri station, your brain knew I am 5 minutes away from work. It knew that in 5 minutes I have to switch on. Now all of a sudden, you wake up the next day and you have to work from home and you're going from one room to another, and an entire 1.5 hour process to switch the brain on is gone, and it's expected to switch on immediately. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
You understand?
Yeah.
So the first thing is build processes in. Once you build processes in, the brain starts to respond to those processes. It starts to pique interest and dull interest based on what is needed at a time. Most people struggle to sleep. Every single CEO or leader in a high-performance multinational company that I work with struggles with sleep. Why? Because they've not taught their brain how to decompress anxiety and stress at the end of the day so that they can get rest. If you've not taught your brain how to bring it to rest, how will it fall asleep? You will be thinking completely. Similarly, how you start your day and how you get into work is very similar with how you end your day, and both of them will have optimal results in where you focus and how you sleep. So how do you stay focused is build process. Once you build a process, you can carve out distractions and you'll be able to focus on that. And then we have a lot of techniques. For example, in sport, we use something where it's very, very simple. It's called, if you narrow your focal field, you increase your concentration.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very, very critical thing. So like I always say, a professional golfer doesn't look at a golf ball. He looks at one dimple on the golf ball. A footballer is not looking at a football. He's looking at one piece of leather on that. He's making contact with one. As you get better, you're even dividing that into 4 quarters and striking on 1/4 of one piece of leather or 1/4 of one dimple is what you're doing. Because if you narrow your focus, your concentration goes up. So one very simple thing that I ask people to do is, once you've built process, right, and you've got your work environment set, clear that work environment, remove any possible distraction. Clear space produces a clear mind. Then take something, like take a permanent marker, for example, if you're working on a laptop, draw a red or a black dot on your screen somewhere, and build into your process that before you start work, I just for 10, 15 seconds focus on that one dot. Because if you have a narrow focal field, your concentration moves up, right? And every time you feel the mind waver, you go back to that dot. hold your focus on there for 15 seconds. It'll increase your concentration, right? And then you can refocus on that. And the more you repeat that process, the gestation period of how much you can hold concentration will start to go up. But everything is neuroplastic and will need to be trained and repeated on go.
Yeah, so it needs to be, it's repetition, right?
It is repetition.
It's through repetition.
Correct.
Well, I really like your example, and a lot of our audience struggles with, let's say, stress. Like, how do you, when you are in a situation of stress, how do you have any techniques to quickly go into a place of stillness and calmness so that you can handle better a situation?
Yeah, the first thing to do is to eject yourself from that situation. And that ejecting could be, hey, listen, going for a short walk.
Yeah.
It could be, just taking space out from there. Because it's very hard to reframe the brain in the same stressful situation. So eject yourself from that situation for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Because a new environment will bring in a new emotion and give you the possibility of reframing it. So the first thing is, if you can eject, right, eject for a couple of minutes, right, it'll give you the possibility to reframe. The second thing is speak. Try to recognize what you're feeling and talk about it, because in the process of speaking about it, you'll reframe in your mind and you'll also switch it from there as well. And the third one is, most people when they're stressed, they go for smoke breaks, But what is a smoke break? A smoke break is, a short inhalation followed by a long exhalation. And it's the exhalation that's making them feel better. Not the smoking, not the tobacco, because a long exhalation, yeah.
But people think it's the smoke, right?
They think it's the nicotine, they think it's the tobacco, but it's actually the long exhalation that's stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. That's getting them to relax. Same thing that we did now. So if you can start to recognize and realize that, hey, if I'm in a situation that I'm feeling a little I'm nervous about, or there's some emotion that I'm not recognizing, breathe first, right? The first thing to do is just breathe. Breathe is long exhalation, slow. Do about 5 or 6, and your neurological system will reset. Now, the way to do that is to take your phone and when your day starts at 8 or 9 or whatever time you start and whatever time you end, pick about 4 or 5 alarms set in that day every 2.5 hours. Let it go off, and that is like a breathe break. It's 30 seconds of you just, irrespective of what the situation is, just do 5 long exhalations. Because if you repeat this 5 times for, say, 2 weeks, it becomes a part of your autonomic nervous system. You'll just constantly respond to this each time. Okay, so, and you'll remember it more. Because the problem is not what to do.
Exactly.
The problem, that's the wrong question to ask. Everybody knows what to do. Every single one of your audience who is stressed, and you ask them, tell me 5 things a stressful person will do, they'll all give you great answers. The problem is no one remembers it when you're stressed. So once again, this is the art and science of questioning. You ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. You ask the right question, you get a completely different answer. The question we should be asking is, how do we get our audience to remember what to do when they're stressed? And the answer is that we need to build it as in a part of their response systems and a part of their natural behavior patterns. Once you bring it into your natural behavior pattern, you will do it irrespective of what the situation is.
And that's what you teach, for example, your athletes, what they do when, for example, they are in high pressure situations. It's exactly what you do.
We do the same thing. We don't change anything.
We
don't change anything. And all of us do this. All of us have certain routines and processes that we have already subscribed to and built in, and we do it on default. So for example, I asked someone who's listening, I said, what's the worst day of your life? Your worst day. They would say, the day I got fired, the day I lost a parent, the day I lost my pet. I said, great. I'm not great that day happened, but great that you can identify the worst day of your life. I said, I want to ask you a question. Did you brush your teeth on that day? Right? And the answer, everyone would say, is yes. None of them can remember doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
But they all know they did it. They can tell you with 100% certainty, yes, I brushed my teeth. Why? Because you repeated that process so many times that it's become a part of your process. And the second thing is that your brain defaulted to doing it because you have associated brushing your teeth with good hygiene. Brushing your teeth is not a life and death exercise. You don't do it, you're not going to die. You understand? But we've associated good hygiene with that activity. So on your worst day, on the day when your entire world crumbled, you still took 30 seconds to do this activity. So if you can do the same neurological connection between breathing or just taking stillness, right? Then on your worst day, in your worst situation, you will default to that. You know, it was when we started this conversation, you asked me, why did I go to the temple and how did I go? I went to the temple. The temple was my natural default environment because I grew up in a family that prayed and took time and went to that environment when anything unnerving happened. So I grew up in that environment. When I felt I was losing control, I went back to the same. You will default to what you repeat.
Wow. You know what? And I was thinking, that's awesome, because I always knew that breath is a powerful tool, but I didn't know how to make it as part of my daily routine so that I can reach out to it in a natural way. And I love your suggestion. Put your alarm 5 times a day. You do that every day. And then that starts becoming a part of you. A part
of you is, and you got to take it one step further. One step further is when that alarm rings, right? It's not going to be easy. What I'm suggesting is not going to be easy in the beginning, but you have to do this. You have to make that a sacrosanct part of your ecosystem in your life, which means that I have had my alarm ring in the middle of doing a virtual call with 500 people. I'm doing a keynote presentation and my alarm rings, and my keynote stops, and everyone has to breathe for 30 seconds. I promise you. If I'm in a meeting, right, because 30 seconds is not going to kill anyone.
Exactly.
And there's a good chance everybody needs it. Right. But what is stopping them from doing it is fear, feeling shy, feeling nervous, feeling that, but they need it. And the number of people that have come back to me after that and said, thank you. Thank you for just that pause. Right. They would never have done it. They didn't even recognize they needed it, but they needed it. And you start to become the catalyst that's bringing this change. And then what happens when you do this is something really powerful. When every time the alarm rings, Rodrigo says, for 30 seconds, all of us are going to stop and breathe. Wherever, right, we're going to stop. If you do this for long enough, you become 30-second Rodrigo who stops to breathe or long exhale because it becomes a part of your identity.
Wow, so cool.
You understand? So the world starts to recognize and respond in the same way that you are.
Wow. Yeah, and this is just an example, like that we can do many examples in our life.
100%.
The same way, like I really, really love it. Okay, so now we know how to stay calm in a stressful situation. Next is, I mean, if we are doing big things, so our audience, they are growth seekers, they are purpose driven. How do I stay motivated consistently in order to achieve what I have to achieve?
Yeah, so that's the wrong question again. You know? Because why is it the wrong question? Because when you ask the question, how do I stay motivated? Motivated is
shit, what? I already know why it's the wrong question.
Why is it the wrong question?
Yeah, because it means that a lot of times I'm not motivated. I mean, it's implicit that a lot of times I'm not motivated.
Well,
right?
it's two. Yeah, one is when you're saying, you're implying to yourself, you're 100% right that I'm not motivated. So you're reaffirming a state of being. And the second thing is you're moving your mind away from process to goal, because the motivation is generally linked around you focusing on the result of something. Motivation is a result-orientated emotion. You're like, I want to be motivated because I want to achieve this. You understand? And result is what? Result is future.
Exactly.
Right. So you've moved the mind away from present to future.
Okay.
You understand? Because motivation for anything is I need the motivation to do push-ups. You understand? But motivation is the wrong word to use. Because why do you want to do push-ups? Because I want to get a great body. Great. But you've asked for an emotion to that rechannel the brain to the result. And what happens with motivation, the reason it dwindles is because you don't see the result quick enough. That's the only reason motivation drops, is because, you want to convince your brain that I need to do this, but you're convincing your brain what you need to do now, right, for something that you're going to see in a long time. And you can't repeat that message all the time, because after a while your brain will stop believing because the results are manifesting.
Oh shit.
You understand? So as a result, it's a wrong signal. So the word motivation is not great, And in sport, we have something really interesting. We say, yes, motivation will exist. Sometimes you're playing a big game, and because it's a big game or a packed stadium, the energy is gone up a little bit, so you can bring a little bit more. But there's sometimes when you're playing and there's an absolutely empty stadium, no one's there, right? But the effort you do can't be any less, because the situation is equally important, right? So when you look at motivation, you're looking at external factors to drive internal energy, and that's a recipe for disaster. Energy has to come from in. But in sport, we say something interesting. We say, motivation at times, you'll be lucky when it exists. But when motivation doesn't exist, discipline must take over. Okay, So the only way discipline will take over is if you have a process. And if you have a process and trust a process and repeat a process, then you're not even looking for the stadium, or you're not even looking for external variables, because you are your own driving force. You are your own energy, your own voice. So
I see. So it's about, what you say is about being focused and discipline in the process, right?
Yes.
Discipline with that.
Correct.
Right? Because that's immediate, that's present,
Correct.
right? Okay, so a lot of people, what happens is, you want to do something and you procrastinate,
Correct.
right? So what is your advice for people who procrastinate?
They're procrastinating because the mind is in the past, thinking about something negative. That's procrastination, fear of failure, So the first thing we have to do is they have to accept and recognize what incident in the past is their mind running to that they're thinking about, And once you recognize that, and we can kind of break that, cut that cord, we can bring the mind back to the present, right? If the mind is focused on process, there's no emotion.
Exactly.
Procrastination, fear of failure, premeditation, confidence, these are the emotions of the mind traveling in different spaces. You have to recognize where it's going for you to, cut that cord, that energetic cord, to bring it back to the present. Because in the present, there is no emotion. There's just execution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I really, really love it.
Yeah.
So good. So we're coming to the end. And maybe you can, so that people understand now how everything comes together, like maybe you can exemplify with me. For me, I want to be on top of my game. Can you guide me on how can I achieve that?
Yeah, so there's different goals. The number one key thing to success is preparedness, always. Always preparedness. How well have you prepared? And it's always about, can I do better? Can I prepare better? Can I do it? And then, if you look at, and I do this exercise, we got a glass of water here, and I'll take a normal glass, and I ask my CEOs, I say, you know what, tell me 50 things I can do with this glass. And they'll start very, very quickly. Drink water. Some guys will say, drink water, drink tea, drink Coke, drink things. So I said, okay, drinking is one. Right, then they'll say it's a vase, and someone say it's a weapon, we can throw it. I said, keep going. Great. Someone says, I can draw a circle. Great, I can cover something. Super, I can use it as a stand, turn it upside down. Great, and it keeps going. And I tell them, you're gonna do this exercise every single week, right, with different random objects, okay? Between the first 20 that you get, you squash that piece of paper and you throw it in the bin.
Okay.
Right. Then you keep going. Between 20 and 30, it's interesting, but not great. You squash that piece of paper and you throw it in the bin. But between 40 and 50 is the real essence, the real gem of your creativeness. It's where you've tapped into your absolute genius. Okay. That is where you'll find you've come up with ideas, even you will be surprised. Right? Most people don't even get to 40. You have to train the brain how to get there, because the brain will always give you the easiest solutions first, and it's given everyone the same solution. Every single person's got the same thing. So once you train the brain with this, coming back to you, preparedness is critically integral. Now, if I ask 100 podcasters to do this exercise around how do you prepare for a great podcast, the first 20 big things they're going to tell me is we're going to go and watch all his past YouTube shows. Then we're going to Google him. Yeah. Then we're going to read some articles. Then we're going to go maybe watch his content or do something. Then if he's got a company, we'll check the company metrics and we'll do this. Yeah. All of this will be in the first 20 things. Squash it, throw it in the bin.
Wow.
Then start again. Now you don't have that. Now force your team to go deeper and go deeper and go deeper. And between 40 and 50, they will come up with unique ways to truly understand your guest, which will now make a podcast that no one has ever recorded with them, because no one has invested the time to go that deep. That will start to then drive every single thing else, right? Because everything comes down to the quality of the question. Yeah. So there.
Kya baat hai.
So, yeah.
Cut. Let's not put this part, otherwise other podcasters will be same. No, super, super good. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Perfect.
Very, very, very good. So we coming the last question. Maybe can you share about your routine for yourself in order to be at your best?
Yeah, my routines, so I take about 100 flights a year minimum, between 100 to 125 flights. I'm on a flight literally every couple of weeks. The one difficult thing about my life is that my routines change. If I'm lecturing at a university, my timings are very different. If I'm traveling with a sports team, then I default to the routines of that team and their schedule. And then if I'm either traveling and working or at home, the schedules will be very different. So I don't have a routine with respect to doing a particular thing at a particular time. But I do have a routine around how I start things and how I end things, or things that I have to do every single day. So for example, 30 minutes of breath work is non-negotiable for me, right? Every single day I'll do that. I will try my best to get to a gym at least 5 days in the week, right? If I can't, so that is non-negotiable. Because I travel a lot, I don't eat on planes. I'll eat before I get on the plane. I'll eat after I get on. I don't eat on the plane at all. Awesome. This is a very, very important routine. The other routines with how I travel is I generally travel in the day, and I get to where I am in the night so I can get a good night's rest so I don't waste 2 days, right? These are simple routines around that. Then I write every single day for 30 minutes, right? Wow. Yeah. But when I write, there's no phone in the room at all. If I'm in a hotel room, I'll keep it in the bathroom, and then I do that. Completely lock everything away. I journal every single day for 30 minutes. I have specific times when I call my assistant. I have specific times when I schedule everything. Everything in my life is completely scheduled. And the most important aspects of my routine is that there's a lot of space. You'll find my calendar is not packed at all. It has massive, massive chunks of free time. And that free time is not necessarily free, but it's not being taken up by other people. I have a lot of routines with how I say yes to and what I say yes to, so I'm not wasting my time, and that I'm doing justice wherever I get to. And I create a lot of space for reflection. A lot of one-on-one time is critical for my growth, my mental health, and for me to show up in the best way possible wherever. So these are a few things that are non-negotiable in my life, and they have to happen every single day, no matter where I am. But like I said, because time differences and schedules, the times are not fixed, but 24 hours won't go without this getting done.
What about meditation?
Yeah, I do it in the form of breath work,
yeah.
Right? I used to chant a lot because I'm in the temple, so I still chant, but I don't consider that as a part of my meditation. I'm not doing any mantra meditation. The way I do my meditation is in the form of breath work, and the way I keep my mind present is I count. So I'm sitting, and every inhalation and every exhalation is 1, and I'm just counting breaths, 2, 3, right? And why I'm doing the count is because as soon as the mind drifts, you lose the count. If I lose the count, then I remember how long I was able to hold the mind focused, right? And the count is an indication of how focused the mind can be and how long I can hold it.
Yeah.
You know, because an average person knows they're meditating for 30 minutes, but they don't know how many times the mind has drifted from there.
Yeah.
They have no way of doing that.
Yeah.
So I bring in the count because if I can hold the mind on my count, if my count can get to, sometimes I've gone over 1,000, right? But if I can hold it over 1,000 and each breath is taking about 5 to 6 seconds, okay, then I can extrapolate exactly how much of time my mind can stay focused on a particular task. Then I can extrapolate that time onto different activities to know how to maximize and optimize my productivity there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. I think bread is really at the center of what you do, and I think would be a nice gift for our audience if we can share a breathing exercise that everyone can practice daily.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so the first thing with breath is I tell everyone, you don't try to sit erect, right? When you sit erect, keep your spine erect, not too rigid. Because we want energy to be able to flow up and down. You can keep your hands on your palms. Okay. So one of the key things to do is, I'm speaking, but for everyone else who's listening, keep your tongue really soft. Because, you know, most of our emotion, anxiety, when your thoughts are racing, then your tongue is very, very stiff. So one of the ways to keep it soft is to rest it against your upper palate. Okay, so keep your tongue soft, rest against your upper palate. The first thing we're going to do is just draw your awareness to your breath. So just breathe in through the nose, very softly through the mouth, exhale. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, you were just listening or recording a podcast with me, so the brain is very, very focused. The brain was very sharp. So the next thing I'm going to do is, as we are focusing on this long exhalation in our mind, we're going to say to ourselves that I give myself permission to relax. I give myself permission to let go of any tension and stress. I give myself permission to completely surrender to this breath. So when you give yourself permission, if you're focusing on your body, you would have noticed maybe your spine arched a little bit, your shoulders dropped a little bit. Your breath, instead of being so rigid, started to feel a little softer as it started to give way. You can start to feel that rise and fall of your chest. So now, as we are breathing, I want you to just visualize the muscles in your forehead and your face get softer. Your jaws and your neck muscles push away any tension. Feel your shoulders drop a little. Feel your arms become lighter. Allow the tension in your fingers to ease. Let them rest ever so gently on your legs. Feel the muscles in your chest soften and push away. Let it melt away any tension. Allow the belly to soften. The hips. The thighs. The calves and the ankles. As you breathe in and exhale, nice and long and slow, allow the body to become even more still. Allow it to soften with every breath. Welcome in those deeper levels of stillness as you surrender to each breath. With the body and the mind absolutely still, start to draw your awareness to what the stillness feels like. How do your shoulders feel? How does your belly and your chest feel? How does the air flowing in your nose and out your mouth feel when your body becomes still, when your body surrenders to your breath? Is there any tension anywhere that you can gently push away to welcome even deeper levels of stillness? This space, this stillness is your best friend. In this stillness, we find absolute clarity. We find all the strength, all of the answers, and all of the courage we need. As you make this space and this stillness familiar, make a pledge or a promise to yourself to keep visiting this space. Each time welcoming deeper levels of stillness, trusting that the space we create will be filled with the energy we need to welcome in everything we want. Draw your awareness to your breath. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Very gently, you can rub your palms together. Just generate a little bit of warmth. You can place it on your chest. Feel a little bit of that warmth. Remind yourself that you're safe, that you're loved. Rub your palms one more time. You can place it on your eyes just before you open your eyes. Feel that warmth. You can take one more deep breath in. And as you exhale, whenever you're ready, you can very slowly open your eyes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This conversation was crazy good. Thank you so much for coming.
No worries.
And,
thank you very, very much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Glad you liked it.